A little over 100 years ago, in the Trianon Palace in Versailles, two mid-level officials from Hungary signed an agreement following the result of the First World War, according to which the country lost 2/3 of its territory, and at one moment around 3.5 million Hungarians found themselves abroad. Even when I first came to study in Budapest in 2010, it was evident that Trianon remained around in the hearts of Hungarians. At that time, the right Fidesz party and the nationalist Jobbik party were gaining popularity. As a result, Hungary's economy, which had a promising start in the transitional period from communism to a market economy in the 90s, turned into a stronghold of populism in Europe and for a long time lost the opportunity to fulfill its dream of becoming an investment emerald of Central and Eastern Europe. During the transitional period of the early 90s, Hungary emerged as one of the most prepared countries in the socialistic bloc. This was because liberalization, slow but nevertheless reforms, began as early as 1968, when enterprises were no longer told what to produce, in what quantity and at what price position. This gave an exceptionally significant boost to the supply of goods in the domestic market, which entered in history as the Hungarian socialism, Kadarism or Guláš communism. During the communist era, Hungary managed to maintain the most liberal conditions among all Eastern European countries. However, this played a bad joke with the country. The relatively more liberal conditions led to less dissatisfaction with communism compared to neighboring countries after the fall of the Berlin Wall. Debates in Hungary revolved not around market transformations, but between liberal leftists and nationalists. Both camps attracted voters with increasing government spendings on social needs. Government debt and inflation grew, competitiveness did not. In 1996, my professor at the Central European University in Budapest, Lajos Bokros, serving as the Minister of Finance, introduced a package of economic and fiscal stabilization measures. Bokros stabilized the balance of payments combining democracy, the rule of law and capitalism. Despite being in a socialist government, the reform package amounted to rigorous austerity against populism. However, his efforts were countered by the resurgence of the nationalist movement led by Viktor Orban. Prime Minister Orban openly flirts with dictatorship and calls Brussels the new Kremlin, bringing the spirit of Brezhnev's doctrine back to Europe. Under the guise of the right for own special opinion, Orban becomes the first in Europe to close an educational institution, our Central European University. The night of economic freedom, Lajos Bokros became undesirable in his own country. I decided to meet with him and ask a few questions. Professor, several years ago, 20 intellectuals in Europe made an open letter to all the governments in Europe, which they called Europe is on fire, meaning that Europe is on fire of populism. Do you believe it is still? Do you believe Hungary is on the way to populism? Do you believe Europe is in the fire of populism?
Hungary is on a populist course, absolutely. It's one of the strongest populist governments in the whole European Union. It is much stronger than the government in Poland, for example, because the Polish government does not have two-thirds majority in the Senate. And it's a coalition government, although with a small party which is even worse than Kaczynski. But it is a threat everywhere. You have it in Italy, you have it in France, you have it even in Spain, which did not have a populist nationalist party for a long time, and even in the Nordic countries, in Finland, in Sweden, Denmark, Norway.
So what's the future for Europe with the wave of populism?
For me, The important thing is to make the European economy much more competitive.
On the global arena.
Absolutely. Which requires liberal approach, which requires freeing up the European economy from heavy-handed government interference.
Professor, precisely 10 years ago, nearby, we've been sitting with you, drinking coffee, after the classes of macroeconomics at our Central European University. Now it's almost closed. What happened during these 10 years?
The government of Orbán decided several years ago to chase away our university. As a consequence, they decided to change the higher education law in such a way that they felt they could never meet the requirements. And although we met the requirements, they withdrew the license of the university. So in order to survive, we decided to relocate to Vienna. Hungary has become the first European Union member state ever to close down a foreign university. The university has survived.
Do you believe the environment became less free, less liberal during these 10 years?
Absolutely. This is no longer a liberal democracy. The government itself proudly says that they are illiberal, and there is no such a thing as illiberal democracy, in my humble view, because you need to preserve liberty and freedom in order for competing forces in the political system to gain power.
10 years ago, after the classes, you gave me the book, your book, which you written with the very famous Hungarian economist János Kornai. And in this book you've also mentioned about such term as soft budget constraining.
Yeah.
Okay? Meaning that in the planning economy, if the entity is not efficient, it is more politically correct to keep it working. Even today we don't have planned economy in the form it used to be. Do you consider such a tool justified in a market economy?
Soft budget constraint exists in capitalism as well, when the political sphere overtakes control of the economy. Even in Western countries, even in full liberal democracies, you can easily see plenty of examples that the government feels that certain enterprises are so important, they call them strategically important enterprises, that they would be saved at any cost. As a consequence, you can say that from the viewpoint of the behavior of the entrepreneur in question, this is exactly the same thing as in the communist system. They don't have to meet the demands and requirements of the market. What they are focused on is to keep good contacts to the authorities, to the soft budget constraint is still the exception rather than the rule in a normal Western.
The intervention of the
But you
government.
see that even in the United States, when there was a need to bail out the airliners, the car companies, of course, the state was the first.
Professor, allow me to go back to 1995 when you used to be a Minister of Finance. So
it was long ago.
It was long ago, but still it was an important part of Hungarian history. Okay, the famous Bokros package. Okay, was the radical stabilization for the economy of Hungary. You've made such an intervention that you made 8% extra charge for the import of any goods in Hungary. As a protector of the free world.
Not any goods.
Okay.
It was selectively applied. primary energy was not levied with this, for example, because Hungary is importing all its energy needs as a consequence. It could have added only to inflation, but rather than, you know, restricting demand. And also, investment goods were exempted at that time. So,
wasn't that protectionism in a manner?
In a sense, it was, but the choice was at that time either to make a bigger initial devaluation of the Hungarian currency. Therefore,
but there was a devaluation of 30% almost, a devaluation of the currency.
No, the initial devaluation was 9, and then we had this pre-announced crawling peg type devaluation for 6 years thereafter, which did not amount to 30%. I would not be able to tell you how much it was.
Okay.
Probably half of that. But the point was that we did not want to create even higher inflation. And as I said, the import surcharge can also be applied selectively. So while the devaluation is a general across-the-board measure, which basically helped the export sector to regain its competitiveness and increase its own profitability. On the other hand, I have to acknowledge sincerely that we wanted to put a brake on inflation and we needed fiscal revenue. Devaluation doesn't bring revenue to the
budget. Absolutely, absolutely.
Selectively applied import surcharge did that, but for my own defense, I can add that when we introduced the import surcharge, at the same time, on the same day, we also declared how and when it is going to be abolished. So entrepreneurs could calculate very easily because the economic policy of the government was absolutely predictable.
So we call the current government populistic government, but he started
nationalist.
Okay, but he started with the idea to cut taxes.
Not necessarily. They cut personal income tax, but increased the value-added tax. So, for example, Hungary is now a world champion today when it comes to the rate of the value-added tax.
What is the
highest?
What is the VAT tax rate?
27.
27. It's the world record.
It's a world record.
It's a world record, ladies and gentlemen.
So, fortunately, not here in the restaurant.
Sure.
Because we pay at a lower rate. But for example, if you buy a car, if you buy anything like clothing or maybe certain durable goods, you pay 27%. Absolutely.
That's a lot.
So it's not true that they are liberal on taxation. They are not. They are maybe.
So they're playing.
Personal income tax. Especially if you take into consideration that many people don't pay anything because the social safety net was amalgamated with the personal income tax system. So those who have children, for example, they can deduct a lot of
income
from their
as expenses. Yes.
Which was also deliberately made in such a way that those who have no jobs, like the gypsies,
so they also voted for the government.
It's a very, very nationalist approach. Believe me. You know, we are in a trap in the sense because on the one hand you have the socialists who feel that everybody should be supported, and we have the populist nationalists on the right who feel that the upper middle class has to be supported. Neither of them would concentrate social support on the needy people. So it shows that across the whole political spectrum, what we don't have is a high degree of social solidarity. I don't think I need any support myself. Why the government keeps electricity and gas prices low? I have a big house.
You're able to pay. You're able to pay. So.
I live there with my wife only. So per square meter, we have a palace almost. And they support us. Why? There's no need. And those who don't have a dwelling or a flat would not benefit from this.
Professor, lately Prime Minister of Hungary, Orban, said that there is a spirit of Brezhnev walking in Europe. What does it mean?
Ask him.
Finally,
probably what he meant was that he likes to compare the European Commission to the Soviet Politburo, so that he portrays the authorities in Brussels as if they were similar to Leonid Ilyich Brezhnev. But it's absolutely false.
okay.
Because Hungary joined the European Union after its own referendum. You don't have to be part of the European Union if you don't want to. But of course, Orban is the first who wants to be
He wants.
a member.
In the end of the day,
Yes,
he wants to be because of the money.
I got a bit confused. My professor firmly stands on the principles of political and economic freedom, but recognizes the necessity of command methods in managing the national economy in exceptional times, and when you do so, announce on the same day when this deviation will end. The Knight of Economic Freedom in challenging times applied protectionist measures to selected sectors of the economy to restrain demand and inflation and to generate fiscal revenues. However, now he criticizes the modern populists in Hungary who have introduced the highest VAT rate in the world. Still, contemporary populists may also refer to exceptionally difficult times and the necessity of fiscal revenues. Hungary in the fire of populism is a confrontation between the left, who wants to support everyone, and the nationalist right, who openly support social inequality and were the first in Europe who closed a democratic university. There are no incentives for further reforms in the government. Other governments in European Union countries see Hungary as a burden, understanding that if the spirit of Brezhnev is walking in Europe, it is most likely in Hungary itself. I bid farewell to so close to my heart Budapest, heading towards no less close Italy, the first leading developed country in the EU on my journey, where I hope to feel the spirit of individualism known since the Renaissance.